Okay, so this documentary may be coming out a bit too soon. Sins of Our Mother is now available on Netflix, but is it jumping the gun in order to be first? Lori Vallow was known to friends and family as a devoted mother of three, a loving wife, and a woman of God. But over the past 3 years, something went very wrong. Now Lori is in jail, waiting to stand trial for conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder in connection with the deaths of her fourth husband, her fifth husband's wife, and her two youngest children. This is like a 48 hours ripped from the headlines type of story. It's true crime, and probably a story that's fairly well known. This 3-episode docuseries tells the story of Lori Vallow, this woman who seemed to go off the rails at some point, leaving a swath of death behind her. Now, I don't think that if you followed any part of this case, the information that's contained in this documentary is going to shed new light. But if you are only slightly aware of it or know nothing about Lori Vallow and the crimes that she's accused of, this is a wildly disturbing and sickening story to watch play out. There are so many layers to this story, and seriously, as the production puts up timeline and family tree graphics to show how everything connects, it feels a lot like that Charlie Day meme. This docuseries gives us a tease of where it's headed at the start, and then it begins to lay out the timeline of events chronologically, just in a very straightforward manner. Now, I won't say it's utterly easy to follow because the events that are showcased just get more and more surreal. Lori Vallow is shown to be a caring and loving mom who's also fairly religious and devoted to her LDS beliefs. She has some bad luck with the husbands who either treat her or her children poorly, so she moves on from one spouse to the next. This documentary is told to us through a series of interviews and news footage, with the interviews really bringing in a great deal of personal detail. Lori's son Colby is a key interviewee in this, as is her mom, and they're able to provide just so much insight into what was going on behind closed doors, at least for some of the story. Now, they give great background to paint a picture of life with Lori, and they showcase how much of it was positive and happy. At some point, though, Lori begins to get more fanatical in her beliefs, veering from the mainstream and delving into areas that, from the outside looking in, appear to be just very ridiculous or bordering on crazy. And I'll address this more in a bit, but I think it's very easy, but also dismissive, to label Lori as crazy. The actions and behaviors we see play out defy understanding or comprehension, but to simply label her as crazy, I think it's a misnomer. Now, other interviewees include Lori's former friends, as well as this investigative journalist named Justin Lum, who was on the story from the very beginning. So he's the most knowledgeable when it comes to the news side of the story. The interviews are all filmed really well, with setups that we've come to expect from any sort of professional interview. Nothing out of the ordinary is achieved in these from a visual or a production standpoint, but they do look and feel like top quality. This is a layered account. Each time something is uncovered, it's more disturbing, and it was making me just so confused at how the actions were able to continue to play out. The crux of this case really revolves around Lori's two missing children, Tylee and JJ. Now, I'm baffled at how law enforcement, when they got involved, were actually less proactive than I felt they should have been. They gave Lori chance after chance to tell where her kids are, and every time she gives vague answers or just outright lies, and yet she's still able to be free and unsurveilled. The first 2 episodes in this docuseries are each about 50 minutes long, and then the final episode is under 40 minutes. Some elements are repetitive in the storytelling, and they're replayed almost exactly a couple of times, but sometimes this helps because the story is so twisted and complex that it can be easy to get lost in everything that's happening. I had said earlier that it's easy to label Lori as crazy because her actions are certainly not rational. Now, this made me think of the conversation that David Mills and John Doe have in Seven, where Doe says, "It's more comfortable for you to label me insane." And Mills replies, "It's very comfortable." And that's the truth. What happens here is heinous and it defies belief. It's stomach-turning to think about what transpired. Now, I questioned whether or not this was jumping the gun a bit in putting out a documentary before the case has actually reached a conclusion. Now, if this were a news program, providing the information that we have so far makes a lot of sense. But from a documentary standpoint, it feels a bit preemptive, like they're just trying to be first in this realm. The information is very engaging, and despite how messed up of a story it actually is, it's very intriguing, and it can certainly pique the curiosity of anybody who's into true crime. But we don't have a resolution yet, so this feels incomplete. We're going to need a follow-up to this just to finish out what this has begun. And also, because this is a fluid case and it's not finished, and then it wasn't addressed in my screener copies, Colby Ryan, the son of Lori Vallow, who's featured heavily in this documentary, he was arrested for sexual assault, and then those charges were dropped with the possibility of the authorities recharging him at some point in the future. That is most certainly a twisted account of a family that has more than its fair share of drama. So So overall, Sins of Our Mother is intriguing, engaging, and also sickeningly disturbing in its content. The documentary does a wonderful job of laying out all the complexities and presenting them in a clear-cut manner. The actions defy belief and understanding and are very difficult to watch play out. Now, if you follow this case, the information most likely isn't going to shed any new light for you. But if you're unfamiliar with Lori Vallow and the heinous actions that she's accused of, this is a riveting true crime account. The production is wonderful from a visual presentation, and the access to friends and family really helped to make this convincing storytelling. I wish, though, that the documentary would have waited until the story has reached just a conclusion so that it can tell the full and complete story rather than having to now follow up at some point in the future to provide the resolution. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and while no violence is shown, there is a great deal of terrible violence that is described and recounted. As a reminder, I don't give couch ratings to documentaries, but this is certainly one to check out, despite the story not being fully completed. So are you familiar with this case? What are your thoughts on whether this documentary should have waited to come out or not? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.